Golden morning light spilled across the marble floors of the Crystal Haven Hotel, one of the city's most luxurious landmarks. Crystal chandeliers glittered above. The scent of polished wood and roses filled the air, and every sound seemed to echo through perfection, except for the faint hum of a small girl sweeping quietly in the corner. She was Leela, barely 10, her black hair tied in a simple ponytail, her maid's uniform slightly too big for her small frame. In her hands, she carried a feather duster almost as tall as she was. Her mother, Rosa, worked 2 shifts a day here, morning and night, keeping the hotel spotless while raising her daughter alone. Leela, Rosa whispered, glancing over her shoulder as she wiped down the golden railings. Be careful with the guests' things, okay? We're lucky to be here. I know, Mama, Leela replied softly, her eyes drifting past the lobby and toward the grand ballroom. At the center of that enormous, sunlit room stood a black Steinway grand piano, sleek, polished, and silent. Its surface reflected the morning light like a mirror, and for a moment, Leela could almost see herself sitting there, her tiny fingers dancing over the keys like her mother's once had. Don't stare too long, Rosa said gently, noticing her daughter's gaze. Dreams are beautiful, but this world doesn't always welcome them. Leela frowned. But you used to play, didn't you? Rosa smiled faintly, her eyes far away. A long time ago, before I worked here, before you were born. That piano, it's a good listener. A good listener? Leela tilted her head. Yes, Rosa whispered, because it listens even when no one else does. The ballroom buzzed with activity. The hotel staff was preparing for Mr. Kellen's charity memorial, an event honoring the late wife of a billionaire philanthropist. There were flowers arriving by the dozen, a stage being built near the piano, and guests expected from all over the world. As Rosa hurried to adjust table linens, Leela stayed behind, drawn by something stronger than curiosity. She stepped closer to the piano. The sunlight hit her face, and the warmth made her feel brave. Her small hand hovered above the keys. Just one note, she thought. Her finger pressed lightly. A soft C filled the air, fragile, like a bird's first song. She pressed another, then another, forming a small tune her mother once hummed while folding laundry. What are you doing? The voice cracked through the air like thunder. Leela jumped, nearly falling off the piano bench. Standing behind her was Vanessa Hale, the hotel owner's daughter, dressed in diamonds and holding her phone as if it were a crown. I'm sorry, Leela stammered. I didn't mean... You didn't mean? Vanessa repeated, eyes wide with mock shock. That's a Steinway, not a toy from the thrift store. Leela stood, her cheeks flushed red. I just wanted to play a little. Play? Vanessa laughed, loud enough for her friends nearby to hear. Oh, this is rich. The maid's daughter thinks she's a pianist now. The group of teens snickered. One of them even took out a phone to record. Rosa came rushing over, panic in her voice. Leela, what did I tell you? Step away, sweetheart. She turned to Vanessa. I'm so sorry, Miss Vanessa. She didn't mean any harm. Vanessa crossed her arms, smirking. Keep your daughter under control. Next time, maybe she'll try on my jewelry too. Rosa bowed her head. It won't happen again, I promise. Vanessa scoffed and turned away, tossing her hair over her shoulder as her heels clicked dramatically on the marble. That night, after their shift, Rosa and Leela sat on the rooftop of the servants' quarters. The city lights sparkled below like fallen stars. Why do they hate us, Mama? Leela asked quietly. Just because we clean? Rosa brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. They don't hate us, Leela. They just don't see us. But I want them to see me, Leela said, fists clenched. I want them to hear me play. Her mother smiled sadly. You already can play. But not like you, Mama. When you played, Mama, it felt like magic, like the whole world stopped. Rosa looked out over the city, eyes shining with memory. Your grandmother taught me music. She said every note we play carries our story, our love, our pain. And when someone listens, truly listens, they hear your heart. She looked down at her daughter. Do you still remember the song I used to hum? The Song of Dawn? Leela whispered. Yes, Rosa nodded. Yes, it was my favorite. Someday I'll teach you the rest. Leela smiled. Promise? Rosa held out her pinky. Promise. They locked fingers, the city wind wrapping around them softly. But neither knew that Rosa's health had begun to falter. Quiet coughs she hid behind her handkerchief, fatigue that grew heavier each week. The next morning, Rosa didn't come to work. Leela waited for her in the hallway until Mrs. Grady, the head maid, came rushing in. Leela, your mother's been taken to the clinic. She fainted during breakfast. The world blurred for a moment. When Leela arrived at the small workers' hospital nearby, Rosa was awake but weak, tubes running along her wrist. She smiled faintly when she saw her daughter. Don't cry, my love. I'm just tired. You'll get better, right? You'll teach me the rest of the song? Rosa hesitated, then placed her trembling hand over Leela's. Maybe not me, but the piano will. It remembers everything we leave behind. Her voice was fading, but her words burned into Leela's heart. Play for the world someday, my little bird. Let them see what kindness sounds like. Leela nodded, tears falling freely now. I promise. Weeks later, Rosa was gone. The hotel sent a bouquet and a formal condolence letter, but nothing more. Leela was allowed to stay temporarily under staff care, quiet, invisible, and grieving. Every night, she sneaked into the empty ballroom, sitting before the piano under the moonlight. Sometimes she would place her tiny hands over the cold keys and whisper, "Listen to me, like you did for Mama." And the piano would respond, soft notes echoing through the lonely room, carrying her sorrow, her hope, and her promise. Little did anyone know, one day, that very piano would stop a room full of laughter and make the world listen.
2 years passed. The ballroom that once echoed with laughter and crystal clinks now glowed with banners and spotlights. The Crystal Haven Charity Gala had returned, this time hosted by Mr. Adrian Kellen, the billionaire whose name everyone whispered with awe. And at the center of the grand event, beneath the same chandelier where Leela's mother once worked, stood the piano, polished, silent, waiting. Leela was 12 now, taller, quieter, and no longer wearing the oversized maid's apron. Mrs. Grady had taken her under her care, letting her stay in the servants' dorms and help part-time with light work. Leela didn't mind. It gave her time to be near the piano. She had taught herself music in secret, late nights when the halls were empty. At first, she used memory, humming her mother's Song of Dawn. Later, she found an old, torn music book in the lost and found closet, its pages yellow and half-burned. She practiced until her fingers bled, until the melodies became a language her heart could finally speak again. That morning, she stood in the back of the ballroom, watching the staff rush around preparing for the gala. Leela, make sure the flowers stay fresh, and don't go near the piano. You remember what happened last time. Yes, ma'am, she said politely, though her eyes betrayed her longing. A hush fell over the lobby when Mr. Adrian Kellen entered. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in an immaculate black suit, he carried an aura that silenced entire rooms. His wife had passed away years ago. The gala tonight was in her memory. Beside him walked his son, Ethan, around 16, with sharp blue eyes and a calm, curious expression. "Everything is ready, sir," said the hotel manager, bowing deeply. "Good. And the piano?" "It's tuned to perfection." Adrian ran a hand over its gleaming surface, eyes distant. "My wife loved music. We'll honor her properly." He turned to his assistant. "Announce the open audition for the evening performance. We'll give one performer the honor of playing her favorite song." Leela froze mid-step, her heart skipping. An audition? The assistant repeated the announcement through the ballroom speakers. Attention all guests. This evening, Mr. Kellen will host a piano challenge in memory of his late wife. Any pianist, professional or aspiring, may register to perform a single piece. The winner will receive a scholarship and global recognition. Gasps spread across the room. It was an opportunity worth millions, fame, fortune, a future. Leela's hands trembled. For a moment, her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Play for the world someday, my little bird. Let them see what kindness sounds like." She looked at the grand piano under the lights, the same one that had once listened to her sorrow. Maybe this was the moment her mother had meant. She hurried to the reception table, where the sign-up sheet was placed. Her heart raced as she grabbed a pen, but before she could write her name, a manicured hand slapped the table. "Well, well," said a familiar mocking voice. "Look who's still here." Leela turned, her stomach twisting. It was Vanessa Hale, now 17, dressed in a sparkling gold gown, still carrying that same cruel smile. "Oh," Vanessa said sweetly, "you still work here. I thought you'd moved on to something more affordable." Leela stayed silent. Vanessa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Don't tell me you're thinking of auditioning." "I am," she said quietly. Vanessa's laughter rang like glass breaking. "Oh, this is adorable. You compete with real musicians? You clean floors for a living." Her friends snickered behind her. Leela's hands shook, but she met Vanessa's gaze. "I may clean floors, but I don't step on people." Vanessa blinked, surprised by the sudden fire in the girl's tone. For a second, she didn't know what to say. Then she smirked. "Fine, sign up. When you embarrass yourself, I'll make sure everyone remembers." Leela signed her name, Leela Rosa, and walked away. She spent the afternoon in the service quarters' old storage room, where a broken upright piano sat forgotten under dust. The middle keys stuck sometimes, and one pedal didn't work, but it was enough. Her fingers danced softly over the chipped ivory. She closed her eyes and began to play the song she remembered from her mother, the Song of Dawn. The melody rose like light through fog, delicate, aching, but alive. Every note carried memory, her mother's laughter, the warmth of morning tea, the quiet lullabies she once hummed. But near the end, her hands trembled. She couldn't remember the final verse. It had been unfinished, the part her mother never got to teach her. She sighed, resting her hands on the keys. "Maybe you'll tell me the rest someday, Mama," she whispered. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and luxury that evening. Diamonds glittered, champagne flowed, and laughter echoed under the golden chandeliers. Reporters filled the back rows, ready to capture the winner. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the host, "tonight we celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Isabella Kellen through the language she loved most, music." Mr. Kellen and his son sat in the front row, surrounded by executives and diplomats. Vanessa Hale was among the first contestants. Dressed in a gold gown, she took her seat at the piano, flashing a confident smile toward the crowd. Her performance was impressive, trained, perfectly rehearsed. The audience applauded politely, though her music felt mechanical, like a beautiful machine missing its soul. After several others performed, the host looked down the list. "Next contestant, number 12, Leela Rosa." Whispers broke out in the room. "Who? Isn't she the maid's daughter? This should be interesting." Leela walked slowly to the stage, her black uniform pressed neatly, hair tied back. Her small hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. As she sat, Vanessa whispered to her loud enough for the room to hear, "Hope she brought a mop, too?" A few people chuckled. Leela didn't flinch. She looked at the piano, the same one that she once touched as a child, and whispered under her breath, "Listen to me, like you did before." Her fingers touched the keys. The first note rang out clear as sunlight breaking through clouds. Then another, then another. The melody grew, soft, haunting, but alive. Every note carried memory, her mother's laughter, the warmth of morning tea, the quiet lullabies she once hummed. But near the end her hands trembled. She couldn't remember the final verse. It had been unfinished, the part her mother never got to teach her. For a long moment the room was silent. Then applause, slow at first, then thunderous. Vanessa sat frozen, her face pale. Her perfect smile had vanished. Mr. Kellen stood, his expression unreadable, eyes glistening faintly. He approached the stage. "Young lady," he said, his voice deep and calm, "where did you learn that song?" Leela looked up, heart pounding. "My mother taught me before she passed away." "What was her name?" She said softly, "Rosa. She used to work here." Mr. Kellen's eyes widened slightly, something shifting in his gaze. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, "I believe we've just heard the heart of music itself." The audience erupted in applause once more. And in that moment, standing under golden light, her mother's melody still echoing through the hall, Leela realized she had been seen at last.
The ballroom still shimmered with echoes of Lila's final note. Guests stood frozen in stunned silence, some with trembling hands over their hearts, others wiping tears they didn't even understand. The laughter that had mocked her minutes earlier was gone, replaced by awe. Even the billionaire, Mr. Adrian Kellen, hadn't moved. His champagne glass hung in midair, forgotten. When Lila finally rose from the piano, her small shoulders straightened. For the first time, she didn't bow as a servant's daughter. She bowed as someone seen. The ballroom emptied slowly. Waiters collected glasses and folded napkins, but Lila stayed back, helping her mother gather the leftover trays. Her mother whispered, "You didn't have to, Lila. They didn't deserve your music." But Lila only smiled. "It wasn't for them, Mama. It was for you." As they spoke, heavy footsteps approached from behind. A voice, deep, commanding, almost hesitant, said her name. "Lila Rosa." She turned. It was Mr. Kellen himself, standing near the stage, his expensive shoes catching the golden light. His eyes, however, weren't cold like before. They were searching. "You played that piece," he said slowly, "as if you'd lived inside it." Lila nodded softly. "It was my mother's song." Kellen blinked. "Your mother's?" "Yes, sir," Lila replied. "She used to hum it every night before sleeping. I found the sheet music in her old box. It didn't have a name, so I called it Promise in C major." At that, something flickered in Kellen's eyes. Recognition, disbelief, then grief. "Promise in C major," he repeated under his breath. He stepped closer. "That can't be possible. That song was written by Elena Rosa." Lila's mother froze. Her hands trembled around the tray she was holding. Kellen turned sharply to her. "Elena Rosa, that's you!"
For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The air between them felt electric, a sudden storm in the silence. Her mother finally whispered, I used to be, a long time ago. Lila looked between them, confused. You know my mom? Kellen exhaled, setting his glass down with care. Know her? She was the brightest pianist I ever met. 20 years ago, she composed the Symphony for Tomorrow that saved my company's launch. Every investor in Europe cried that night. And then she vanished. He looked back at Elena. I searched everywhere. Newspapers said you quit music, but no one said why. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. Because my husband, Lila's father, passed away that same week. The fame didn't matter anymore. Music stopped sounding like music. It just hurt. A silence so deep it could break hearts filled the hall. Kellen's expression softened. Elena, I had no idea. Elena shook her head. You weren't supposed to. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. Lila's eyes shimmered as she listened. So that song really was yours? Her mother smiled faintly. Yes, my love. I wrote it for your father. His promise was that no matter how far he went, he'd always hear it in the stars. Kellen looked back at Elena, realization dawning. You didn't just play music tonight. You brought back a lost voice. He took a step closer. Do you know what your mother's music once meant to this city? It inspired hundreds of children to learn piano. It even funded the music therapy wing at St. Clair Hospital. And now, it's you who carries that gift. Lila felt her throat tighten. I just wanted Mom to smile again. Elena reached out, her hand trembling but warm. You did, baby. You did. Mr. Kellen cleared his throat, visibly moved. Lila, I have a request. Our company is hosting a charity concert next month, dedicated to unsung heroes of music. Would you play at the opening? Lila's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just... No, Kellen interrupted gently. You're not just anyone. You're the daughter of the greatest pianist I ever knew. And you just reminded an entire room what passion sounds like. Elena covered her mouth, tears rolling freely now. Kellen continued, If you accept, I'll personally sponsor your music education. You shouldn't be cleaning tables. You should be composing symphonies. For the first time, Lila's voice trembled with hope. I'd love that, sir. When they finally left the ballroom, the world outside had changed, not in sound or light, but in feeling. The moon hung low, reflecting on the wet pavement. Lila carried her mother's hand tightly. Mama, did you really know that man? Elena chuckled softly. He was one of the few who truly understood music. I'm glad he saw you today. Lila looked up at the stars and smiled. I think Dad heard it too. The faint wind brushed past, soft, melodic, almost as if the world itself hummed the same tune she had played. Her mother listened, eyes glistening. Yes, she whispered. He did. Inside the silent ballroom, long after they'd gone, the piano still stood under the fading lights. And if someone listened closely enough, really listened, they could swear they heard faint echoes of Promise in C major playing all on its own. A song once lost, now reborn, through a maid's daughter who dared to play it for her mom.
The ballroom still shimmered with echoes of Lila's final note. Guests stood frozen in stunned silence, some with trembling hands over their hearts, others wiping tears they didn't even understand. The laughter that had mocked her minutes earlier was gone, replaced by awe. Even the billionaire, Mr. Adrian Kellen, hadn't moved. His champagne glass hung in midair, forgotten. When Lila finally rose from the piano, her small shoulders straightened. For the first time, she didn't bow as a servant's daughter. She bowed as someone seen. The ballroom emptied slowly.
Waiters collected glasses and folded napkins, but Leela stayed back, helping her mother gather the leftover trays. Her mother whispered, "You didn't have to, Leela. They didn't deserve your music." But Leela only smiled. "It wasn't for them, Mama. It was for you." As they spoke, heavy footsteps approached from behind. A voice, deep, commanding, almost hesitant, said her name. Leela Rosa. She turned. It was Mr. Kellen himself, standing near the stage, his expensive shoes catching the golden light. His eyes, however, weren't cold like before. They were searching. "You played that piece," he said slowly, "as if you'd lived inside it." I nodded softly. "It was my mother's song." Kellen blinked. "Your mother's?" "Yes, sir," Leela replied. "She used to hum it every night before sleeping. I found the sheet music in her old box. It didn't have a name, so I called it Promise in C major." At that, something flickered in Kellen's eyes. Recognition, disbelief, then grief. "Promise in C major," he repeated under his breath. He stepped closer. "That can't be possible. That song was written by Elena Rosa." Leela's mother froze. Her hands trembled around the tray she was holding. Kellen turned sharply to her. "Elena? Rosa? That's you!"
The days after the gala felt like a dream. Lila and her mother no longer walked invisible through the hallways of other people's luxury. People actually stopped to smile. Some even whispered, "That's the girl who played at Kellen's event." But fame was never Lila's goal. Every morning, she still helped her mom pack food trays for the cafe. The difference was, now as she worked, she hummed. Her melody filled their tiny apartment like sunlight through old curtains. One morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside their small building. A man in a suit stepped out holding a white envelope. "Delivery for Miss Lila Rosa," he said with a polite bow. Her mother blinked. "For her?" Lila hesitated before opening it. Inside was a thick invitation embossed in gold. The Symphony of Hope Charity Gala, hosted by Kellen Industries. Guest performer, Miss Lila Rosa. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "You reminded us what music truly is. Now remind the world. A.K." Lila's hands trembled as she held the letter. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's time, my love." But preparing for the concert wasn't easy. Lila practiced on an old digital keyboard in their living room. Some keys stuck, others silent. Each mistake echoed like a failure she couldn't afford. Her mother would stand behind her, softly saying, "Don't count your mistakes, Lila. Feel the story." But one night, as the rain drummed against their window, Lila finally broke down. "Mama," she whispered, voice shaking, "what if they're right? What if I'm not ready?"
Her mother turned off the keyboard and took Leela's hands in hers. "You were born ready. You just forgot for a while." Then she smiled faintly. "Remember what your father used to say? Music doesn't come from your fingers. It comes from your scars." That night, Leela didn't practice notes. She practiced feeling. The charity gala took place at the Crystal Hall, a domed marvel of glass and light overlooking the river. Inside, chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the world's most powerful people gathered. Politicians, CEOs, even famous artists. Backstage, Leela sat in front of a mirror, wearing a simple white dress that her mother had ironed 3 times to make perfect. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the ribbon on her wrist, the same ribbon her father had given her years ago. "Deep breaths," her mother said softly, squeezing her shoulder. "You're not playing for them. You're playing for the promise." Mr. Kellen entered backstage, dressed in an immaculate suit. "Leela," he said warmly, "the board is expecting great things. The media's here. No pressure, just history." Leela forced a smile. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." As he left, she could hear the muffled sound of the MC introducing her. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer, the young prodigy whose music silenced a ballroom." Applause roared through the hall. Leela looked at her mother one last time. "I'm scared," she whispered. Her mother smiled. "Good. That means you care." Leela stepped into the spotlight. The grand piano gleamed beneath it like a sleeping dragon waiting to breathe. For a moment she stood still, blinded by the lights, deafened by her own heartbeat. She could feel hundreds of eyes fixed on her, some curious, some doubtful. Then she sat down, took a breath, and whispered to herself, "For you, Mama." Her fingers touched the keys. The first note floated like morning air. The melody she played wasn't perfect. It was alive. It began as a whisper, fragile and tender, then grew into a storm of emotion, grief, love, and courage colliding in every chord. The hall transformed. Even the chandeliers seemed to shimmer in rhythm. When she reached the middle of the piece, the lights dimmed and a holographic image appeared behind her. Old footage of Elena Rosa, her mother, playing the same song decades ago. Gasps filled the audience. Kellen turned toward the control booth, astonished. "Who authorized that?" A staff member whispered, It wasn't us, sir. The projection triggered automatically from the piano's memory chip." Leela didn't stop. She played harder, merging her mother's performance with her own, two generations united in melody. It wasn't just Promise in C major anymore. It was the symphony of mother and daughter. Suddenly, click, the power went out. The chandeliers went dark. The hologram vanished. The hall plunged into blackness. Gasps echoed. Someone shouted for a technician. Reporters scrambled. Leela froze, her heart racing. Oh no. But her mother's voice cut through the dark, firm and clear. "Keep playing." So she did, without light, without guidance, without fear. The audience sat in pure silence as her music filled the void, a single soul fighting back the dark. By the time the power returned, tears streamed down the faces of nearly every person there. The last note lingered in the air like a prayer. Then, thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping until their hands turned red. Mr. Kellen stood among them, eyes shining with something rare, pride. Reporters crowded the stage. "She played through a blackout. She's the next prodigy of our generation." But Leela barely heard them. She turned toward her mother, who stood in the wings, hands clasped to her chest, crying softly. She ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Did I do okay?" she whispered. Her mother smiled through tears. "You didn't play the piano, my love. You played the world." That night, when they returned home, Leela placed the invitation letter in a small wooden box beside her father's old photograph and her mother's music sheets. On the envelope, she wrote, "The night the lights went out and love played on." As she closed the box, her mother touched her hair and said, "Your story's only beginning, Leela." Leela looked at her mother's reflection in the window and smiled. "Then let's make it beautiful."
The world woke up to her name. By morning, Leela's performance was everywhere. Short clips on social media, articles titled "The Girl Who Played Through Darkness," and a dozen interviews she didn't even know she gave. Her face, glowing in candlelight beside a silent piano, became a symbol of courage and art reborn. She had played through a blackout, and somehow it had lit up the world. At the small cafe where she and her mother still worked, customers now came not for coffee, but for a glimpse of the girl who played at Crystal Hall. Her mother smiled quietly each time someone whispered Leela's name with admiration. But fame, as her mother said, was like a candle. It could light a room or burn your hands. And soon it began to burn. It was a Tuesday morning when a silver luxury car stopped outside their cafe. A man stepped out, tall in a long black coat, holding a briefcase. He entered with a calm authority, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Leela. "You're Leela Rosa, correct?" Leela hesitated. "Yes. Can I help you?" He handed her a card. Marcus Vale, A&R Director, Orion Records. Her mother's hand froze mid-wipe on the counter. Orion Records, one of the biggest music companies in the world. Marcus smiled. "I saw your concert at the charity gala. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. My boss believes you're the next global artist, and we want to sign you." Leela blinked. "Sign me?" "Yes." He opened his briefcase, revealing a contract embossed with gold lettering. 3-year deal, worldwide release, private studio access, 6-figure advance. Her mother's breath caught. That money could change everything. Their debts, their rent, her mother's health. But Marcus's tone was smooth, rehearsed. "There's one small condition," he added casually. "We'll need full rights to all your compositions, past and future." Leela's eyes widened. "All of them? Even Promise in C major?" He nodded. "Especially that one. It's our top priority." Her mother stepped closer, protective. "Why do you need her old pieces? Can't she keep ownership?" Marcus smiled tightly. "Mrs. Rosa, that's not how the industry works. We invest. We own. In return, your daughter becomes a star." He slid the pen across the table. Leela stared at it. The world she dreamed of, the stages, the music halls, the orchestra, all suddenly felt one signature away. But something deep inside her twisted uneasily. That night, Leela couldn't sleep. Rain whispered against the window like old memories. She sat by her small keyboard and stared at the sheet music for Promise in C major, the song her father had written, the song that started everything. Her mother entered quietly, wrapping her shawl tighter. "Are you still up?" Leela looked up, eyes glistening. "They want me to give it away, Mama. They'll own it." Her mother sat beside her. "Do you remember what your father said about promises?" Leela nodded slowly. "A promise isn't something you sign. It's something you keep." Her mother smiled sadly. "Exactly."
The next morning, Leela went to Kellen Industries, where the charity concert organizers worked. She hoped to talk to Mr. Kellen. Maybe he could advise her. But at the front desk, the receptionist frowned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kellen's out of the country." Leela sighed, turning to leave. Then a familiar voice called out, "Leela!" She turned. It was Aaron Kellen, Mr. Kellen's son. He had been at the concert too, quietly watching from the side. He was about Leela's age, though his world was 1,000 miles wealthier. "You look troubled," Aaron said. She explained everything: the offer, the condition,
the confusion. When she finished, Aaron thought for a moment. "Do you know who owns Orion Records?" he asked. "No." He smiled faintly. "My father." Leela blinked in disbelief. "Your what?" Aaron nodded. "And Marcus Vale, he's our acquisitions head. My father trusts him, but I don't." Later that day, Aaron invited her to the Kellen headquarters. Inside the glass-walled conference room, he opened his laptop and pulled up internal files. "There," he said, pointing at a report. "Project Aurora. Recomposition rights. Lila Rosa. Promise in C major." Below, in small text, it read, "Objective. Acquire emotional performance piece for AI music program beta test." Leela's stomach dropped. "They're not buying my music for me to play it. They're going to use it for machines?" Aaron nodded grimly. "They want to train our new music AI using your emotional range, the way you play, your timing, your hesitations. They'll replicate you." Leela's voice cracked. "They'll replace me." Aaron looked at her serious. "Unless you say no." That night, she and her mother sat in their dimly lit kitchen. Her mother said quietly, "If you sign, you'll be rich, Leela. You could stop cleaning, stop worrying, maybe even buy me that house with the garden." She smiled sadly. "But it wouldn't be my music anymore, Mama. It'd be theirs." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then keep what's yours. Even if the world forgets you, your music will remember you." For the first time, Leela realized her mother didn't want her to become famous. She just wanted her to stay pure. The next morning, Marcus returned to the cafe, contract ready. "So," he asked smoothly, "have we got a deal?" Leela looked up from the counter, her voice calm but firm. "No, I'm sorry. I can't sell something that doesn't belong to you." Marcus's smile faltered. "You do realize this means losing everything?" Leela nodded. "Then I'll start from nothing. At least it'll be mine." He stared at her for a moment, then gathered his papers. "Bravery doesn't pay bills, Miss Rosa." He left without another word, but as the door closed, Leela felt lighter. Her world might have just shrunk again, but her soul felt enormous. For days, the world forgot her. The interviews stopped calling, the headlines moved on. The fame she'd borrowed vanished as quickly as it had come. But something more important remained, her integrity. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, a letter slid under their door. It wasn't from a label or a lawyer. It was handwritten. "Dear Leela, my father doesn't often change his mind, but your courage has made him listen. He wants to meet you, not to buy your music, but to help you protect it. Aaron Callan." Leela smiled, her heart lifting. Maybe the promise she kept was finally being heard. That night, she sat at her small keyboard again, her mother beside her. She played Promise in C major once more, slower this time, gentler. Each note carried the story of everything they'd endured: laughter, loss, courage, truth. As the final note faded, her mother whispered, "You kept your father's promise." Leela looked out the window toward the stars and said, "And now I'll make my own."
The hall was silent again, but this time for the right reason. No mockery, no whispers, only awe. Lila stood by the grand piano, her fingers trembling over the final keys. Tears glimmered in her eyes, not from fear, but from understanding. Her father's melody had led her here, to this very moment. News of the performance spread overnight. Every major outlet from Tokyo to New York carried headlines like, "Maid's daughter stuns elite with lost masterpiece." The piano prodigy who played her father's farewell. But Lyra didn't read any of it. She stayed home with her mother, curled up on the couch, a cup of tea between them, the sound of gentle rain filling the silence. Her mother finally spoke. "Your father would have been proud." "I hope so." There was a quiet ache between them, not of sadness, but completion. Later that week, while packing away her music sheets, Lila found something new. A folded page stuck behind her father's old notebook. On it, written faintly in pencil, "One day, the world will hear your music, and they'll know who you truly are." Beneath the message was a series of numbers: 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. She stared, confused, until she realized it was the Fibonacci sequence. Her father used it often when composing. When she applied it to the melody's progression, a new pattern emerged. She ran to the piano and began to play. The tune felt familiar, but different, richer, more alive. And then, between the rising notes, something clicked. Her father's voice, a faint, digitized whisper from an old recording, played along with her. "If you're hearing this, it means you have found the missing piece. Keep playing, my little melody." Lila's hands shook. "Dad." The old tape recorder beside the piano blinked, its light flickering weakly, then dying out. But the music kept flowing, through her hands, through her tears, through everything he'd ever taught her. Weeks later, Lila was invited to perform at the same hall again, this time as the headline act. The same critics who once mocked her now waited eagerly, pens trembling. The same billionaire patrons who sneered at her uniform now whispered her name with reverence. But Lila wasn't playing for them. As she took her seat, she turned toward the audience and found her mother sitting in the front row, wearing a soft smile. Lila leaned toward the mic and said, voice steady, "This song is for the person who cleaned this very floor while I dreamed of being up here. For the woman who taught me to stay kind when the world wasn't. For my mother." The hall went silent. Then she began to play. The piece started soft, gentle, fragile, but with every note it grew in warmth, depth, and purpose. It wasn't just music now, it was memory. As she played, holographic lights shimmered on the stage screen behind her, recreating her father's handwritten notes, glowing in soft golden light. Each line of music danced with her keystrokes, forming images of laughter, childhood, love, and loss. And when the final note rang out, the hologram faded, leaving only one glowing sentence: "For my daughter, my melody." That performance became legendary. The recording went viral within hours. Millions watched, millions cried. People from every background, every corner of the world wrote messages like, "I saw my own mother in her story. She made me call my parents and say thank you. Music still has a heart." She was offered record deals, concert tours, and scholarships from around the world, but Lila turned most of them down. She chose something quieter, something real. She opened a small music school right next to the cafe her mother once cleaned. She called it Promise Academy. There, children from poor families learned piano for free. Every year she hosted one special concert, The Melody of Mothers, where all the students performed for their parents. And every time she played, Lila still used the same old upright piano her father left behind. Its surface worn, its keys chipped, but its soul alive. Years later, during a soft spring evening, Leela sat by the piano once more. Her hair had grown long, her hands stronger, but the music still flowed with the same grace. Her mother, older now, sat by the window, watching her daughter with quiet pride. Leela began playing the song again, the one that started it all. Halfway through, she smiled to herself and whispered, "Can I play it for you, Mom?" Her mother laughed softly. "You already have, all these years." The room filled with golden light, and in that moment, everything was perfect. The melody, the memory, the love, endless like the song her father wrote.